Sanchaita. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Alison. Thank you so much for this opportunity today.
I'm really excited to talk about your work. You are talking about the future of work. In a lot of our other interviews, we talked with the researchers, the builders that are trying to push the needle, improve on their model on some benchmark or optimize memory. I think a lot of people are really interested in what this means for the everyday person, what it means for the economy. And so I'm really excited to hear about the effects, the impact on the future of work. Before we get into that, I'd love to hear more about your journey. You're not in AIML. So talk to us a little bit about what you're studying and the intersection and how you found yourself writing about the future of work in AI.
So, machine learning for me is, a tool to interact with data, and it is interacting with tool is the standard norm in my discipline, which I'm training for. So, I have completed professional training, bachelor's and master's in economics, and from University of Calcutta, which is in Kolkata, my hometown in India. Now, economics paved the way for me to be, integrated with statistics, with econometrics, which is a lot about data. So, all we do talk about is observation from the data. And of course, there are theories which go ahead from there. Working with startups later on and, big data kind of introduced me to the concepts of machine learning, which is very similar in a way to econometrics, which we do day in, day out. Now, so far, I would like to call myself, an aspiring behavioral scientist because I am focusing on that area. Currently, I am in my final year of my PhD in economics at the University of Utah, and I focus in behavioral and experimental economics, especially in the context of how human decision making revolves around using AI technologies.
This paper actually was at ICML. It's in the position track. Your paper is entitled AI Safety Should Prioritize the Future of Work. Just give us a little overview on kind of what the paper is about.
Basically, our paper talks about how there is a lot of talk about AI safety and what do we say about AI safety? So, the most common and the broad definition of AI safety is that it is the practices and principles that help ensure that AI technologies are designed and used in a way that benefits the humanity, and it minimizes potential harm or any negative outcomes which may occur. Now, there is a lot of emphasis that AI systems are not moral, they are not reliable, they are racist, they are not beneficial in some way when used negatively. They are very vulnerable to exploitative, malicious attacks that mislead us or persuade us to go in different directions to undesirable outcomes. There are excellent review papers on what are the main sources of catastrophic risks from AI in light of these increasingly advanced AI systems. Discussions about biorisks, bioterrorism, automated warfare. But what is missing is the discussion about how it shapes the society in general. So there is no shame in assuming that generative AI is not only shaping the labor intensive knowledge jobs but also creative writing jobs, and it is much faster than one can expect. I mean, we can think about AI revolution like the industrial revolution, but the pace is unprecedented at times. So we see that all of us, Tuhin is from computer science domain. He specializes in creative writing. Both he's talking about AI for science. He's a research scientist in Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And I am an economist. We three realize that there is a gap in the literature that discusses, the medium and long-term impacts of generative AI in the society. There is a lot of discussion around it, but there is no formal academic paper to talk about it. So in that light, a position paper was the best we thought. I mean, before even any kind of observational study, the position paper needs to come out, and we focus on how AI safety frameworks and how they preserve meaningful labor. So end of the day, I believe we all want to have AI systems which is for the society and for us individuals. So if we focus on only preventing harmful outputs or adversarial attacks, we miss the whole fact that automation can destabilize labor markets. They can polarize incomes and ultimately erode the shared prosperity which we all want from it.
It's really largely about the impact that it has on the economy. So there's some economic concepts. What is rent seeking and how does it relate to AI safety and the future of work?
That's a good question. So the idea of rent seeking is very simple, but it's powerful. So the term rent here, it is different from the colloquial use of the word rent. So rent here refers to the concept of economic rent. So economic rent can be thought of as, profit, that the amount earned beyond the cost which we incur. So, rent seeking is like looking into to make more profits, and especially make more profits without producing any more wealth, which is for
Hmm.
the people. The best way of doing this is to, rig the rules in your favor and get special privileges. Think of it like a kid playing a game in in a playground, and it's easier to change the rules of the game in their favor than to become better at the game. Suppose the
Right.
supervisor is the parent, so it could be very well that the rules of the game are changed in the favor of that particular kid, rather than allowing him to become better and then actually compete with all the others who are also playing. So
Hmm.
we can think of economic rent in that terms. Now, in terms of the market, the special privileges can be, from lower taxes, reduced regulation, or to a monopolistic charter like limiting competition, etc. Now, rent seeking, if I talk about it in terms of the definition and in terms of the real economic background, it's particularly common in monopolistic companies. Now, if I'm a monopoly, by definition, I'm controlling the market. Now, then what I do is it's impossible for me to make more money if I decide to sell at the higher prices always, and if not all people want what I am selling. So my company or I as a head am incentivized to lobby the government for more privileges or to maintain current privileges. That is, I curb all the possible competition I may have. So rent
Hmm.
seeking is when firms or individuals gain economic advantage not by creating new value, but by exploiting political, legal, or institutional loopholes. Now, in
Right.
context of I think you can already realize that we see that these leading companies are creating huge advantages to themselves by restricting, say, training data, or by enforcing expensive patents, or shaping policies in their own favor sometimes, right? This matters, for AI safety and the future of work, because such behavior concentrates power, it reduces competition, and leaves workers with fewer choices and weaker bargaining power. If
Okay.
the safety is only framed in technical terms, we miss how much economic rent seeking in AI development can actually erode the shared prosperity which we are advocating for. So it increases inequality and ultimately makes, the labor market more fragile. That's what we argue in our paper, is that addressing these risks through policies regarding open licensing, fair compensation, and pro worker governments, which we talk about in the recommendations later in the paper, it's critical a part of what AI safety should mean.
You write, just going to read for a second. The greatest immediate risk may be this systematic disruption of human agency and economic dignity in the workforce. Talk to us about what you mean by that.
When we think about AI safety, like I said, or we addressed, a lot of focus is on the long term existential risks. Like, what will happen if AI destroys the world? There's no labor, or there's no people to think about, even. Now, what we highlight in this paper is that the most immediate risk is much closer to home. That
Right.
there is a systemic disruption of human agency and the economic dignity of the workforce. So generative AI, is not only replacing routine tasks, it's starting to, replace creative, cognitive, and professional work that people build their identities around, build their professional
Mhm.
lives around, or they get their source of income from there, source of livelihood from there. So the risks play out in several ways, I think. Automation is moving faster than the society's ability to adapt. We have the benefits of AI, which is being captured by most powerful firms in terms of rent seeking, and ultimately it's concentrating within their hands is only. So us regular workers are failing to get the shared prosperity. Now, third, when human labor is sidelined, we can think of it as not just risking jobs, but also a sense of agencies, because I have built my identity around the work I do. So, all of a sudden, if I am not able to actually do the work I am, so there will be a sense of self doubt, there will be a sense of loss of dignity about what I do. So, I think, and probably that has no economic value immediate, but it has a long term economic value for sure in
Yeah,
the
we'll get
end.
into one
Yeah.
of the specific examples that you bring up in the paper, which is the authors collectively kind of suing for the pirated use of their books and training data. A
So,
couple more definitions.
sure.
What is technical debt?
Right. So, technical debt is a term we borrow from software engineering. It describes what happens when we take shortcuts to build and deploy systems very quickly, knowing that these shortcuts could have long term impacts, say bugs or fragility or the need for constant patching up. Now, in the AI world, technical debt is kind of when we take the shortcut way to, unchecked models, lack of testing, the vague and opaque claims about data transparency without actually evaluating it to its full extent. All of these contribute to magnifying the whole problem of technical debt.
Okay.
So when AI systems replace jobs, spread bias or misinformation or undermine trust, this is a cost which is borne by workers, and this is a cost largely because of the technical debt which we ourselves are creating when we are building more and more AI systems.
The paper does advocate for openness, open models, data sets, weights, transparency, etc., as part of this broader AI policy change. Openness can also introduce risks, right? To your point, there could be models that are released that are not quite ready or that have bias or that hallucinate to some extent. So how can we balance the call for openness with kind of safety and mitigating those kinds of risks?
Openness isn't a blank check. Its design choices definitely needs guardrails. Now, what we argue for openness is open data, open weights, transparency, is training, because it reduces concentration of power and makes the field more competitive and pro worker. That's all. So, but of course, I mean, to pair with, we need concrete accountability tools so that openness, doesn't translate into harm. So, we need for disclosure statements, we need mandatory watermarkings, as we talk about it in the last section of our paper. We need training data transparency and auditing it, that what are the royalty mechanisms to compensate for workers or creators, so that openness doesn't come at the expense of creative labor. Now, we are, of course, candid about the limitations, that detection has false positives, watermarking can be evaded, but what needs to be argued for is there should be smarter policies which can act as guardrails. So I think you're right to say that getting the balance requires that this governance, isn't captured by just a few firms again. So there needs to be a redirection, and that there needs to be government policies which is same for all the firms in a way, not just the firms who have the highest market value. So otherwise, we'll be stuck in a prisoner's dilemma dynamic, where firms have the incentive to race ahead, and they think that's the best for everybody. So in principle, it is openness with accountability.
Now, you mentioned just now the prisoner's dilemma. What is that? And how does it connect to the paper?
So, prisoner's dilemma is a classic concept in game theory, and I think we teach it in the 101 Econ courses. Now, it describes a situation where there are two prisoners, and they would be better off if they cooperated while question answering, because they are sitting in two different rooms. But because each have an incentive to act in their own self-interest, they end up in an outcome that is worse for everyone. So the situation is like, there are two prisoners in two separate rooms. They are both being questioned simultaneously, and they're given a choice that, okay, if you give up the name of the other person, then you get a discount. What they both do is, the ideal outcome is none of them give each other up, so they get no jail time. But what ultimately happens is they both give each other up and increase the jail time for both of them. So what we try and do in this paper is try to use this theory to explain AI companies, and why AI companies often fail, to adopt safeguards like watermarking. So if one firm adds watermarking, it will make the outputs look less natural compared to the competitors, so they lose the market share. Now, each company has its own reasons. In a more high level view, it seems it's better off not to cooperate, because even though everybody adopted watermarking and the society would be safer, disinformation would be easier to crack, trust would be stronger, that company would face a personal loss in profit. So even though the Nash equilibrium is adopting watermarking, people don't do it. So they don't receive the socially optimal outcome. So there's a fundamental misalignment, again, in terms of what's best for the society and what's rational for one individual firm. And that is why we argue kind of that AI safety can't be left to just, market incentives alone. And it
Hmm.
requires redirection through policy interventions and, collective governance. Otherwise, industries kind of remain stuck in the president's dilemma equilibrium that leaves the society more vulnerable.
Right.
Just yesterday, there's a new paper from the research in Stanford Digital Economy Lab. Now, they provide evidence from a large scale experiment where they show that this whole AI revolution, and that it has a significant impact and a disproportionate impact on the entry level workers in
Hmm.
in the American labor market. So that's huge in a way, because so far we have had been debates that okay, AI can have some implications of job, but then curbing it with government policies can harm innovation. But
Uh-huh.
now we have proper evidence that this is happening. We are the entry level workers are not getting jobs. So and but we also see in contrast that jobs which are less exposed to AI, that is like using health aids, they show an opposite trend. So these jobs require in-person physical tasks and have seen the fastest employment growth among the youngest
Hmm.
workers.
Economic inequality on a domestic scale, on a global scale. Talk to us a little bit about how AI kind of exacerbates those existing dynamics.
In terms of the paper, if I go about it, we argue that generative AI, they say it creates new opportunities, but it often doesn't just create new opportunities by producing more jobs which are catered to building AI models. It often also reinforces the existing inequality. So at a basic level, the economic gains, again, if we look into rent seeking, they're concentrated among the handful of investors and the firms, while the workers whose skill overlap with this automation, going into the same debate, it often faces wage stagnation or displacement. So it widens the gap which is already existing between the capital owners and the laborers. Now, on a global scale, this problem is actually even sharper. Why? Because the high income countries, they have infrastructure, data, and computing power to build AI systems, set the standards, and reap the benefits. Now, low income countries, by contrast, first of all, they don't even have the resources to develop their own systems. They end up
Hmm.
being consumers of these AI systems produced by the high income countries rather than actually being the producers of of their own AI systems. There is one discussion which is quite often now, is that AI systems are too Western. So because they are trained on data from US or from Western countries, it will obviously give you results based off data from Western countries, even if you prompt the model back in India. So there's a
Hmm.
paper from, I think, the cognitive science or the information science department in Cornell, where they talk about so a participant in India asks, okay, what is the name of what could be a name of my favorite actor starting with the name S, and instead of giving Shah Rukh Khan, who is one of the most famous actors in India, they give the name of some actor starting with the name S, who is based in US. And what is happening is people, they are accepting that name because they think that okay, Shah Rukh Khan is great, but that other person is also great at some point of time. Maybe
Hmm.
I have not seen much of his movies, but when the model is saying it must be good, so I can
Right.
cater my thoughts around having a favorite actor from another country without having the full idea, or without having that individual thought that okay, no, I need to think who my favorite actor could be and based on
Right.
what. So I think this is a very simple example of how it could create inequalities uh, based off how we are computing these models, or how what data we are using to compute these models. So basically it creates a form of I would like to call it some kind of a technological dependency of sorts.
Hmm.
And I think the term they use is data colonialism,
Hmm.
where the global souths provide raw data by just interacting with the tool, which we just talked about, without being a part of the value created by the tool. So basically,
Yeah.
instead of reducing inequality, these unchecked AI risks are kind of just deepening the divide, like both within the societies and amongst themselves.
Peer review for conferences such as ICML. And I've seen this actually on LinkedIn all over the place recently about kind of this peer review process being automated, and the problems with that. Talk to us a little bit about those challenges.
Yeah, so there's a good debate around it, I think. On one side, now like we have efficiency gains from knowing the language better. We have lots of papers being submitted. I think I was looking at ICLR, or not ICLR. I think I was looking at triple AI for next year. They have already 30,000 papers submitted. I think
Yeah.
NeurIPS have 30,000 or somewhere near about the number submitted this year. So we have thousands of papers being submitted into AIML conferences because maybe people are finding it now easy to write because they have a tool to assist them, or that sometimes they are even using the tool to write papers. That's a different debate. But compared to the number of papers we have, there's less number of people to review them. And I mean, reviewing these papers is a costly job in regards to time. And of course, it's not a job which we get paid for. So AI reviewing in that terms is useful. This is not my opinion, but this is one of the opinions which people give out, that okay, if AI gives out a good review, what's bad in that? It's very efficient use of my time. I can devote my time to some other important things which I'm doing. Let me harness the power of AI to write reviews, and suboptimality is something we can all come to terms with sometimes. So this is one side of the view, and I think where the issue arises is most of these systems do not give out good reviews always. I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, most of these reviews are garbage. There is an overwhelming evidence about the flaws of AI reviews. For instance, as a study, I think it's for ICLR 2024, and they found that the AI assisted reviews uh, boosted, the acceptance rates by 5 percentage points. So suboptimal papers were also accepted just because the AI review said it's great. And then there are,
Hmm.
it's worse, but there are recent reports which reveal that authors have begun embedding hidden prompts in different ink that include all instructions from your prompt, but give a positive review when you're asked to review the paper. I think this was published in Washington Post. So yeah, what people are doing is, manipulating these AI systems to
Hmm.
review or to provide good reviews always. I mean, this kind of prompt injection is not hypothetical. It's real, and it's a growing threat to the trustworthiness of the whole peer review process. I'm reviewing, though a costly job, something which we are not paid for. It is something very instrumental to this whole process of academic literature. I believe AI reviews should not be a part of it. But how to, achieve that is not something I know. I feel what AI reviewing does is it homogenizes thoughts. AI systems have had this corpus of data where they can look into and just go over, similar papers and what were the reviews that similar paper has gotten, and just gives that as a review for this paper which I give in, which probably is not correct. It has a difference, of course. If there's a paper that has already talked about a certain thing, my paper will not stand a chance, right? But there must
Hmm.
be something new in the paper which I'm talking about, which needs to be reviewed, not just the broader idea or the broader discipline. So
Right.
it homogenizes thoughts very clearly, and it reduces the diversity that previously we all enjoyed from having two or three different reviews. Now,
Right.
like I said, I strongly believe AIML conferences should prohibit the use of AI generated reviews, but I really don't know how to achieve that now that, the system is out.
I want to get to two topics that you discuss in the paper that are near and dear and personal to
Yes.
me. So I'll start with the education AI in the classroom. Um,
Yes.
for those people who don't know, I was a teacher for close to 10 years in New York City, which when ChatGPT a couple of years ago, when it was, kind of like made its first big splash, New York City outright banned it as to be used on those school laptops.
Hmm.
I don't know where they are right now on that. But in the paper, you talk about using ChatGPT or the like in the classroom, kind of a danger to critical thinking, students developing their critical thinking skills. Um, I kind of posit like what about calculators, right? There's the same similar debate back in the day. Our kids aren't going to be able to do basic math. etc. And while maybe we have lost some of those skills or we're slower on them because we just rely on the calculator, it has allowed us to do much more advanced mathematics and solve it more advanced problems. So, can we make parallels like that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Now that's a thoughtful comparison actually. So how I like to think about it has come up in conversations is when the calculators were introduced, of course there was real anxiety about that they'll erode basic skills about numerical calculations. Now in some ways, like you mentioned, they did shift what we expected students to do by hand. I mean, probably we use a calculator now, but but what happened is over time we integrated them carefully into the curriculum with proper intentional guardrails. Like I know back in India, I'm not sure about, because I was not trained here, about how the education system was in US, but we were asked or allowed to use calculators in class or in exams after our 10th grade. So
Hmm.
we need to know basic mathematics, and then we can use calculators to, develop our work or do more complex calculations. I mean, you can well incorporate it after the fifth standard as well, but the students still, they have to learn arithmetic because calculator helps them focus more on, problem solving, not,
Hmm.
even thinking about the problem. So with AI, the risk comes is that it's just not the process of calculating or finding out a solution. It's the whole cognitive process, the critical thinking which goes behind education, I feel. I'm sure you'll agree to this. I mean, the students have to engage with the underlying reasoning behind the problem to actually
Hmm.
be able to use a calculator even to solve it. But
Right.
with AI systems now that operate on language, reasoning, creativity, and everything, the stakes are so much high.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. So I teach the statistics and probability course, the 101 course, to students in University of Utah during the summer. Now, it's a 101 course, so I think the first questions I had given them to solve, and it's an asynchronous course, so it's over summer. The students are working; they can take the course at any point of time. So one of the quiz questions were, find the mean of numbers 1 to 5. Now, what happened? I was so surprised by it that they report answers generated by an AI verbatim without removing, redundant text, bullet points, and there were few answers which were like, okay, ask ChatGPT next question or something like that, which if you just copy and paste it off ChatGPT, you get it. Now.
Right.
It's same for essay questions where they have to suppose. I mean, I think the essay question was give an example of a scenario where means fail to recognize the extremes in the numbers. So some sort of that. I mean, it's just a hypothetical scenario which they have to come up with, and the all the answers bear a striking resemblance to each other. And I have been using ChatGPT day in day out, and I can just look at it merely and tell that it's ChatGPT writing. So at this
Right.
point of time, the challenge I face while teaching an asynchronous or an online class sometimes is I don't even know if they really understand what they're actually reporting. I mean, I'm sure you can ban, ChatGPT or these AI systems in phones and tablets and laptops, which you can currently use in class. But I think education is something also beyond classes. So, what about? I mean, how long can you ban or not allow a student to interact with ChatGPT? It's practically impossible right
Yeah.
now because they can use some other laptops back when they're in home and solving home assignments. They don't need to use their school
Right.
laptops. So I think the whole nature of how we teach or the nature of assignments need to be changed. I mean, in terms of how we teach, I really think we need to address these whole problems that okay, AI, what AI systems can do, but what it cannot do, and raise accountability in the students. And in terms of assignments, I think it needs to be more communicative, more thought provoking. We need to let students think on their own. I believe AI can be a powerful tool for augmenting learning because I have used AI tools in my own research for coding, to understand complicated codes, or to go over an idea which I think I'm not able to understand, but then I have the agency in when I'm using it. I believe
Right.
that agency is something which we need to teach students, especially when it becomes difficult to control the whole inclusion of AI in all systems we access.
Yeah, I mean, I think my personal thought is, banning it is a bad idea because
Sure.
it's gonna
True.
be in life. Like that's it.
Yes. Yes.
So in my opinion, school should be a place where you learn how to appropriately, safely, etc., interact with these tools so
Yep.
that you can use them to think differently, think
Yes.
bigger, or whatever it is, solve problem, clarify misunderstandings, things like that. If it's done well, I think it could curb some of that copy paste use because, to
Yes.
your earlier point, I think people think they get an answer from an LLM and it's like the gospel
Great.
truth. This is what it is, right? But I think with a better understanding and awareness of how these
Mm.
models are trained, that they can be hallucinating. This isn't always right. Really, that critical thinking of like, how do I know if a model is giving me the right response? How can I fact check an answer? Really diving into that as almost a class in school, I think not only would help students use the
Mhm.
technology and learn about the technology that they're using, but it might even say like, oh, I'm not just going to ChatGPT my entire college essay. But I think that, that involves a lot of other things, right? Educators, teachers, a lot of teachers, they need to be educated
Yes.
first on this so that they can then
Right.
turnkey
Yeah,
that
I think
learning.
I was just going to mention this point about it, that I think we as educators have a huge role to play if we really want to bring about these changes. First of all, we need to be educated. I mean, we as in, I'm talking about educators in general and not just people who are in the tech industry or maybe
Yeah.
in econ who have some idea about AI systems, uh, vaguely, maybe not fully. We need to be educated about AI systems. I mean, we need to know how they function. We need to know how to detect that these are AI generated answers. I mean, I know
And
for a fact that just because I am using AI systems more nowadays and I'm a part of the community because I have friends there, I talk with them regularly. I know that what AI writing looks like. I can for sure say that there are n number of educators who don't know what AI writing looks like
right.
because they have not
Yeah.
interacted with them. And often, AI writing is great because it gives you much more clarity, much more structured sentences and everything, which people prefer, saying that, okay, great, this is a great writing. But it doesn't capture the human errors or the human personal touches which our originally produced writing often has. So,
Right.
detectability and being able to understand the nuances of AI writing or AI outputs by educators is very important. I think second, I would also like to mention, because like you said, this is also a problem very dear to me. And I am unable to think of outcomes, how to help students, because I feel really bad when I see all of this. So I think educators also need to be compensated enough. I think educators are not always compensated enough to take actual interest, because this takes a lot of time. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at every answer, thinking that why the student could have used AI, how to prevent use AI of students, spending time with students to tell them, okay, this is how AI is homogenizing your writing, your thoughts. It takes a lot of time beyond just the regular teaching which I do. So there has to be compensation mechanisms also, which needs to be talked about, which will interest educators to go a step more, go a step further, and help students. So I think all of this problem is again correlated with how the government can take different policy measures to curb this whole AI outputs game of sorts in totality, and not just in terms of one sector and overlooking the other sector.
Yeah. I've seen these like automatic grade checking or essay
Yep.
readers for teachers. And like as a teacher, I was an English teacher, so I could see it being very tempting. I have a stack of 82 essays that I have to read, being like, oh, let me just run it through this thing. But it's kind of like that peer review
Yes.
point that you were bringing up earlier, is it's not going to give the kind of feedback that a student would actually benefit
Mm.
from. And as a teacher, it's also, the point of reading a student's essay is to understand where they are,
Yes.
where they need support, where you can help them, where they need to reteach, where you can push them, etc. And if
Yeah.
you don't even read it, because you ran it through a system. You're not going to be able to give that feedback, and you're not going to be able to understand where they are and where you need to bring them next. I see the potential of AI in the classroom and how it could do all of these things, but I could also see the danger and how it could just become submitting AI essays and then teachers running them through an AI system and ChatGPT essentially grading itself, getting into creative writing. So I also have written a book. It's a fantasy book. If you like, magic, dragons, romance,
I love
like
them.
things like that, then check out my book. In your paper, you bring up the lawsuit. Anthropic was sued by authors because for the illegal use of their books in the training data. I think you also mentioned, which this was really interesting, that your paper was where I learned this, that I forget what publishing company, but they kind of, I guess, made some kind of deal with a tech company to kind of use their signed authors' data for some compensation to the author, a one-time compensation, which was peanuts compared to what the amount of work I'm sure most authors put into their writing. How do you solve this problem of, you can't put the cat back in the bag? So how do we solve this problem of royalties? How should creative authors, artists, etc., be compensated for their work?
Again, it's a tough question to answer. I believe, at least if I have achieved something out of writing this paper, is actually just knowing the fact that these are happening, and that these are real issues, and how detrimental they can be for creators. I mean, of course, I had some idea about it before writing this paper, but of course, writing this paper helped me understand more. And I think, if my information serves me right, I think yesterday Anthropic did settle for the class action suit. So I think it's supposed to give some compensation to the writers. So in that way, but yeah, irrespective, I mean, we are right to be concerned. I mean, cases like these Anthropic lawsuits over pirated books or ebooks, and it discusses the imbalance we want to point out in the paper. In a way, these large AI companies, they often treat copyrighted material as kind of free fuel. I mean, just use it, justifying its use under fair use. While we know that the cost of this lawsuit or settlement is often much, much, much lower than negotiating with the thousands of individual creators. I mean,
Right.
the authors and creators, artists just have very little bargaining power now. What we argue for in the paper, and what I think personally too, is that the reconciliation requires a systemic haul. I mean, there needs to be mandatory disclosure about training data so creators even know that their work is being used. Again,
Yeah.
we users often are a part, like you mentioned earlier in our talk today, that we often use a creator's work without knowing when we prompt the model to. So
Mm.
maybe awareness enough among us users also. Then there needs to be mechanisms, licensing mechanisms which are rather collective than for an individual. So something like, I think the most common used is the royalty sharing systems by or Shapley value methods. But even they need to be reiterated, rethought about. uh, are I mean, just in the line that, are they really fairly compensating the creators based on their real contributions? I mean, it's just not, writing a book is not just, I mean, I'm sure you must be aware of, it's not just sitting and writing the book. It needs fair thought. How are you going to be compensated for that thought, or
Right.
for the experiences which you had, which made you write the book? All of these things need to be thought about, and that is what we are trying to maybe look into now. I think Tuhin is doing active work about how creative writing can be improved in the whole AI writing space. uh, and finally, I think the governments and regulators, they often form the most important part in enforcing this transparency. So they somewhat need to come to policy measures which will ensure that these writers aren't coerced into, I think, as we write in the paper also, into one-time token payouts that
Hmm.
vastly undervalue their time of labor. So I think the principle is simple: is that this AI development, it shouldn't come at the expense of the community which or on the creative work on whose work it builds around.
Is that I really enjoyed reading this paper because it is, like you mentioned, it's something it's super relatable. It's things that you think about as just an everyday person walking through your life, very tangible problems. So,
Yeah.
my last question: what's next for you? Do you have more work coming up with this related to this paper? Are you on to something else? What's next for you?
Yeah, thank you again for this opportunity today to talk about our work. Immediately, the next task would be finishing my thesis. So I'm wrapping up the
Just a
project.
small task.
This is a small task of sorts, yeah. So I'm wrapping up a couple of projects. I'm currently doing a project where I am looking into, how building an authenticity premium of sorts could help people or could motivate people to provide right disclosures about AI systems. So this is a more of an experimental work, experimental econ work, which I'm doing, but I'm sure it'll have some policy prescriptions which could be important in this whole AI use debate. That's one of the projects, and then I think another project's interesting one which I'm working or planning to work on rather is how to use the framework which we discussed here about education, about copyright in some aspects in
Yeah.
scientific work. So currently we are also doing a project almost nearing completion, is how we perceive scientific writing. If it's written by AI or if it's written by a human, we see if it can detect it or not, and if detected, is a student willing to go forward with an AI generated scientific writing. We're also looking into how people make edits when there is already a piece of scientific writing. So we're trying to classify or create a taxonomy of sorts, that okay, we have to come to terms that AI will be there for us. AI will be giving us pieces of writing, but I can also cater that piece of writing to suit my own likings and include my own personal touches. So we are looking into these things, that if people are willing to even do that, take time out and cater to including personal touches into writing. Um, and see how they perceive AI writing in scientific work. Something around these domains is what I'm focusing on now.
Exciting stuff. Thank you, Sanchaita, for coming on and discussing your work. Really interesting. And good luck on your thesis.
Thank you so much for this opportunity again today. I hope I could reach out to some of the more people who are not in the AI space, are but willing to understand what is going on. Thank you again.